Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm here with Robert, who does the historical tours of Greater Holyoke. He offers public and private tours of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, Chicopee, and South Hadley, Mass. You can find out more information on his tours and check out some of his videos and photos and his schedule as well at his website, holyokecanaltour.org. Or you can also email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And today we're talking about the Holyoke Canal system. So describe the Holyoke Canal.
Okay, it's a canal system that is 5 miles long. It goes fully through the bottom two neighborhoods of Holyoke, Massachusetts. It was started in 1847, and it's a power canal. That means it generates power for the industrial mills that are along it. It's a 3-level canal, 3 canals, first, second, and third level canal. And they're leveled so that the first one's higher than the second is higher than the third, so forth. And then the first one is parallel to the beginning of the second one, but the second one then sweeps around in a U shape and follows the Connecticut River. And then the second one at its southern end drains into the third canal, which is the shortest canal. It's only 3/4 of a mile long, and it's an L shape and ends by the Willimantic Bridge, and it empties finally its water into the Connecticut River right below to the south of the Willimantic Bridge. So this canal system is still functional. A few of the mills still have water going below it to generate power, and also since then there's 4 power stations built along the canal that are made by Holyoke Gas and Electric to generate power. So it's still a power canal, both used by mills and by the city.
Now, what are your Holyoke Canal tours like?
Well, there's a car tour that you can take where we can go to like up to 16 stops. There's also a bicycle tour where we do the inner core and we very easily go to 13 stops. That's very enjoyable because you get to see one stop that the other walkers and the car drivers don't get to see because it's only available to people that take bikes. It's too dangerous to stop in a car. It's too far away to walk to it. And so bicycle walkers get to see one of the most beautiful stops. And of course, you can also walk it. And that's the most popular by far. I give walking tours the canal at least 2 a year. And in this year, I'm going to give 2. One is for the first and second level canals. And you get to walk along the second level canal up to the first level canal where it comes in at the Connecticut River, then along back to Holyoke State Park. And you get to see 8 different stops on a total of 16. There's also the third level canal, which we're going to do this year. We're going to go from Race Street up to the Willimantic Bridge and over, and then cross back and look at along the way. I believe there's 4 different stops so we can see them.
Now, what mills developed along these canals?
I believe about 80 mills were along the canal system at its height around the 1930s. And so right away, of course, there were 2 of them, the Hadley Falls Mill number 1 and 2, which are still there in the form of the Lyman Mill and the Hadley Mill, which are now called Open Square and the Hadley Print Shop. But along the way, lots of mills came in. During the 1870s, the paper mills came in, and that's when Holyoke was called the Paper City. It became a city in the 1870s, and it became with a lot of paper mills, so they called it the Paper City. It produced more paper than any other location in the world. It did so for probably 80 years at the height, and it did so at such a rate that it could have been supplying up to half the world's paper at its greatest peak.
Now, what connection is there between the Holyoke Canals and the 2 in nearby communities, the South Hadley Canal and the Chicopee Canal?
The oldest one of all is the Holyoke Canal, started in 1794 and finished in 1795. It was at first a navigational canal. It was built so people could get by the rapids that are now covered up by the Holyoke Dam. there's a 30-foot drop of rapids right there. Unfortunately, you cannot see it anymore because the dam covers it up. And boats had to supply Northampton and Hadley, and they couldn't. So they built the canal there. It didn't take that long at all to build, only a few months. It was only about 4 feet deep and about maybe 15 feet wide. And in the 1847, it was bought by Holyoke. And at that point, they changed it into a power canal and a navigational canal. But by 1863, it was now only a power canal. And it stayed as a power canal, feeding up to 3 mills that were there, like Texon Mill, the Stevens Mill, the Hampshire Mill. They fed them as a power canal up to 1977 when the Texon Mill finally went out of business. Now, the Chicopee Canal is the first canal. Actually, there's 2 canals in Chicopee, the Chicopee Center Canal and the Chicopee Falls Canal. The Falls one was from 1823. The Center one was from 1832. It was the second one of the 3 communities. So you can see the Holyoke Canal came last, but it was the most powerful of all. Now, the Chicopee Falls Canal is totally gone and filled in. The Chicopee Center Canal is still there. It's still functional. It still develops power at a couple places. And you could walk along it. There's a dirt walk from the Chicopee Library to the right, but to the left, it becomes concrete and tar path where you can ride your bike over it. Now, if you go to the very end of it, the western end, and then cut in, you start to see homes. And those homes are very similar to the Hadley Falls worker homes in Hadley. And there's a reason why. Because John Chase and his buddy, Charles McClellan, built the Chicopee Center Canal, and they built the homes for the workers. And so those 2 men went over to Holyoke about 15 years later and started making the Holyoke canal system. And the homes for the workers look exactly the same. And it's astonishing to see both of them. They're separated by about 6 miles, but they're almost exactly the same look to them. The canal in Holyoke is much stronger, though, and so John Chase made quite the strong canal system.
Now, how has the Holyoke Canal evolved?
It's evolved so that in the beginning, mostly it was to feed water into the mills. Go below the mills, you'd have these tunnels. They'd go from the first level to the second level to the river, or the second level to the third level canal, and then the third level to the river. And they always had tunnels or races below these mills. And the water would drop from the race down into a pit where you would have a turbine. And the turbine would spin around. It would have belts attached to it, and those belts would spin gears, and those gears would then spin other belts that were hooked to looms, that were hooked to machineries, and so you can have seamstresses working on these belts, and you can have big machinery going. And nowadays, along the way, lots of city-owned power stations are on them, so there's 4 of those, and so it's still a power canal, but much less so having the water go below the mills.
Now, what will you do on future tours of the canal?
I helped to keep developing so that I know every mill and what it did along the way. I know where the mills were and kind of what they generated, but I want to learn more. And I want to have outdoor and indoor tours of each of the mills that are still there. And I started doing that last year, and I want to continue doing it this year, where I would go around the Lyman Mill outside, and then around the Lyman Mill inside, and show how it operated. But I want to do every mill that still operates, tour around it, and then inside of it. So people not only get to see the outer canal, which is great in all its aspect, but also the mills, and they'd be separate tours. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us again. And again, you can check out his upcoming schedule and some of his videos and other podcasts on his tours on his website at holyokecanaltour.org. or email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Cohen, in which he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and these are special tours to me because the first one I ever did was Holyoke Canal, so I'm glad we're going to talk about that today.
That's awesome. So today, you're going to be talking about so you're going to be educating us on the Holyoke Canal Gatehouse, correct? So the canal system starts at a gatehouse. So can you describe that for us?
Yes, and today it'd be somewhat inactive because they're trying to block the flood. It happens to be in July of 2023, this podcast, and there was a flood from rainwater 3 days ago, and it's coming through. But today they were trying to block it as much as possible because you want to have only a certain level of water come in. So this is a great example. All right, now this gatehouse has 12 gates total. 10 of them are very large. They're about 30 feet high and approximately 10 feet wide. Then there's 2 little ones that are a little shorter and not as wide, and they're along each of the 2 edges. And what they're trying to do with the gatehouse is trying to control the amount of water coming in. And they can control it down to the inch. And that is great because you want to keep as much water in there, but not too much, because you don't want rainwater in there to cause floods. But you want to give the mill owners a chance to have the water come through. Now, there's only a few turbines left in these mills, but Holyoke does have along the canal 4 of its own canal side power stations, and they want to keep the water at the required level and not a bit higher, not a bit lower. And this is a great system because you can control the amount of power you get. As long as that water is coming through pretty quick, you get a lot of power. Certain days the water is not going very quick, like in dry times in August, you're not going to get much water in, so you're not going to get much power generated. It all depends upon how much speed you can get that water system going. Then this gatehouse has been around a long time, so we're going to talk about the history of it. We're going to talk about how it functions, and we're also going to talk about special apparatus around it. Right? But the last thing I'll mention right now is that it's a rack and pinion gatehouse, which means that the gates have on them gears. They're straight along the sides of the gates, and they go over a gear that's circular, and a little motor drives individually each one of those gates upwards. So you have 12 gates, you have 12 separate motors, and you can use any one of the gates open, or any one of them closed, any one at a certain height that you want to keep the whole system down to the inch of how much water you need.
Now, is this the original?
Okay, this is actually the second gatehouse. The original gatehouse is not there anymore, made in 1848. It was replaced about the 1930s maybe, and since then they used the second one. But the rack and pinion system, it might not be the original, but it's the same rack and pinion system. And the gatehouse walls may be replaced, most especially the gatehouse itself, where everything is housed indoors, has been replaced. So it used to be wooden, but now it's a metal-based system. And it's still a very strong system. It still controls the water in very much the same way. Originally, it would have been controlled by people cranking up the gears, but since electricity came into Holyoke in 1895, it's been controlled electronically, and it used to be controlled by a button, even when it was electronic, but now it's controlled digitally and automatically for the most part. But there's still an engineer on duty 24 hours a day through every day of the year, just in case something goes wrong electronically or mechanical doors, or if the amount of water coming down the Connecticut River is greater or less than they ever expected.
Now, so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. Again, it's BOBCAT4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. They make for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for group parties, especially those special occasion get-togethers. They're also good for just getting outdoors for the day. Now, getting back to our interview, let's see. Is there a similar gatehouse on the South Hadley side?
There's a gatehouse on the South side, but it's much, much smaller, and at this point, it's non-functional. So the gatehouse on the South Hadley side was put in at the same time as the Holyoke side, 1848, but it's a tiny one. And the reason why they even put it in is because from 1795 to 1848, the South Hadley Canal was used for navigation only. But from 1848 to 1863, a 15-year span, it was used both for navigation and for power. And so they wanted to control the water, and they separated the water for two uses, and they wanted to control how much was going in for each use. And you had the navigation system further to the north, and the one inside closer to the river was for power, and that would control the amount of water, the power the mills could get for their power system, which was, again, hydro-mechanical turbines. And they took the water under those three mills, or two mills back in that span, and they generated power just like over at Holyoke. But you can see, compared to Holyoke's 60, 70, or 80 mills, Holyoke had two on the Connecticut River taking in power. So it was a much smaller system. From 1863 onwards to 1977, they got rid of the navigation canal and it became only for power. And so they added more mills, so you had three mills taking in the power out of that water. So you needed two gatehouses on the side, one for navigation and one for power. What a system.
Now, what is up with the diagonal submerged beam?
All right. Now, just downstream in the canal beyond the gatehouse, you have a diagonal beam that's tied upwards, further up towards the gatehouse on the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side, you have it tied much further down, and it's at an angle, a very steep angle, maybe you would call it about 65 to 70 degrees. And what it's doing, you want to get rid of the fish out of the canal as much as possible. And if you don't, they get killed by the turbines. And so what you do, once the water passes the gatehouse, or once the fish are in the water past the gatehouse, you want to get rid of the fish, but not the water. And so that enormous submerged beam has inside of it louvers. And they're positioned such that a fish going downstream would see only the wall itself and not the louvers, and they'd continue along this flow of water, and they'd come to the leftmost edge, and there's an enormous tunnel. And the fish go into that tunnel, go downhill in the submerged tunnel until they come to the channel that is alongside the Connecticut River. And they're released into that channel and they go southward into the Connecticut River. The water inside of the canal, when it comes up to this diagonal metal beam, sure, it might be hit by the water might be hitting a beam and hit and deflect towards the left. But there's louvers, and the water will then go around those louvers, and so water goes through, and fish do not.
Okay, so thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and also we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune in to a large selection of other podcasts and much more at his website, again, holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you for tuning in to our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Mass. And your host, Carrie, and I'm here with Robert, who is a local historian and tour guide and does the historical tours of Greater Holyoke. He offers both public and private tours of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, Chicopee, and South Hadley, Mass. You can check out his website at holyokecanaltours.org for more info, as well as check out his videos and photos and his 2023 schedule. Today we'll be discussing the Holyoke Canal spillways. So, what is the function of Spillway 3?
Okay, on the Holyoke Canal system in Holyoke, Massachusetts, you have spillways. That's because it's a level canal system, and you have to get water from one level to the next. You also have to get water from the canals and back into the Connecticut River, where it came from. And so how do you do that? Via spillways. So what is the function of spillway number 3? This spillway is on South Race Street. It might be hard to find, but if you type in to Google Maps South Race Street, I use my website, you'll be able to find it. Now, what does it do? It takes the water from the second level canal and drops it down into the third level canal. And that's a drop of 12 feet in this case. And so you can get power from it. So some of the spillways also have a power station associated with it. This one happens to have a small one to catch some of that 12-foot drop and get some of the power out of that drop. So this spillway is good to see because you have the old wooden boards being used as a spillway. You can get very close to them within a feet of it, and you can see where it is, and you can see where the energy station, which is about 80 feet to the north of it, is. So this is a good example, and it looks very old, so it's a good start to look at a spillway.
Now, tell us about the Spillway 5.
Every spillway is different. They have their own different properties and character. This one is only one thing to do, and that is take the water from the canal system and put it back into the Connecticut River. This spillway number 5 is in South Holyoke. It's on level number 3. The drop from level 3 back into the river is 30 feet. And so this drop is incredible. Now, for safety reasons, they put no power station on this third level canal. You would think a 30-foot drop of water, put a power station there. But for safety reasons, you want to get the water back safely into the canal system without any back up anywhere. And so in this one, they put only a spillway and no power station. You can see it very easily from the third canal. You have to look through an old railroad bridge, and then you see an opening that looks like it drops down, and that's beyond is the Connecticut River.
Now, what about the function of the old Spillway 5?
The old Spillway 5, Spillway 5 did not replace the old Spillway 5. It's just due to renumbering. So this one is found on the end of Appleton Street, at the very eastern end of Appleton Street. And to go there, just go past, even where Appleton Street and Canal Street meet, go past, and you're on a bridge, and you're a little bit short of the juncture of Appleton Street and the inner Water Street. And if you look to the north, you'll see an old masonry structure. And this one doesn't function anymore. So you're looking at an old spillway, you can see where the water could have come in. It doesn't operate because a half mile of the canal number 2 has been taken out, and it was taken out about 32 years ago. The reason why, there was only one emergency situation ever on the canal system. That happened around 1981, and they decided to shorten up the canal number 2, and it no longer would reach the spillway number 5. And so then nothing happens. But it used to go there, go over this one, they generate power there, and then the water would go below or into the side of the Norman Mill and the Hampton glazed paper mills. That you can't see anymore, but you can see pits with water collecting down below.
Now, what about the function of the spillway 4?
Spillway number 4 is about half mile up to the north on this canal number 2. It's a half mile north of the old spillway 5. And spillway number 4 is very important because this was the first canal power station. It was put in 1885 to generate electricity. So it was the first power station at Holyoke. And what it did, it had both coal operation and canal water operation. It still does canal water operations. You can see at this juncture that the end of Canal 2 is blocked up by a grassy knoll. And you can see, if you look across the canal and look beyond the canal, that the water is now going out towards the Connecticut River. But there's a power station in the way and a spillway in the way. You can see that the water is starting to drop down. All right, this one's great to see, especially if you go into Water Street. And it's one of the bigger canal power stations. And there's only about 4 of them right on the canal. And this one is probably the 3rd biggest out of the 4.
Okay, now can you explain the function of the spillway 2?
Spillway number 2 is right after Boat Lock Station. It's right after where the water falls from the first canal to the second canal. That's a 20-foot drop. And they put it there because they didn't want to build up water inside the second level canal. They have, at this point, in Boat Lock Station, they have 4 turbines generating power. And this is the second biggest canal-based energy source in Holyoke. And this spillway number 2, it takes a lot of water over that spillway, and in the excess drops into a little raceway to the left edge of it. And that raceway is long. It goes probably at least a half mile through a walled system into the Connecticut River. It's a very important one because you don't want any buildup of water from the first level canal at a point that's very close to the entrance gateways. And
again, last but not least, tell us about the spillway 1.
Well, it is kind of the least because it's not there anymore. So when the 1848 dam was put into place, the wooden dam, this spillway, number 1, was just beyond the gateway of the canal. And any excess water coming in would spill over number 1 and would go out into the lower part of the Connecticut River. But from 1896 to 1900, they constructed the new masonry Holyoke Dam. This would have deposited the water above, and so it wasn't needed anymore. So they walled it up, and there is no spillway number 1 to see. But if you want to see where to be, just look at the gateways right from Pulaski Park, and it was in that wall right next to the gate itself. So thank you for the description of the spillway system.
Well, thank you for explaining us that. And again, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltours.org, where he has videos, podcasts, and photos, and his schedule for 2023. So hopefully you check that out, and thank you for listening. So today you're going to be talking about the Holyoke Canal test flume. Now, who is James Emerson?
Well, the Holyoke Canal test flume is part of the Holyoke Canal system, and it's in Holyoke, Massachusetts, of course. So James Emerson was the first head of the test flume. A flume is where water comes into a system and then it drops onto an object and then it continues on its way. The name could be used as a geological feature. It could be used as a mechanical feature. It can also be used as a recreational feature. Think of the flume at recreational parks. Well, James Emerson made the first test flume in Holyoke, and it's at Boatlock Station in Holyoke on the canal. And what happens, he used the drop from the first level canal to the second level canal to make a flume. And what it does is it's a test flume. So it tests something. And what does it test? It tests the turbines that would be used in the mills. You'd put the turbines with cups facing upwards, water rushing down into those cups, which would then spin the turbines. You would then test the properties of the turbines. And so he would use that 20-foot drop of water, have the turbine down below, and then measure properties such as the rotation rate, the amount of water coming in compared to the amount of energy going out, which shows how efficient it is. And when you have these turbines being made, there was no set pattern. And these designers, these mechanical engineers, would design them to help make it turn even faster and more efficiently. And you would want to know how efficient they were compared to how much water coming in. A certain amount of water passing by has a certain amount of energy, and how much of that energy is transferred into rotational energy into those turbines. And he was the first in Holyoke to do this. He got the rate of efficiency up within 10 years during the 1860s, up from about 60% to 80%, which is great. So people would bring their turbines in and say, test this. And he would test it under low flow water, medium flow water, high flow water. And each time they would test how much spin they were getting out of it. And then they would give them back to mechanical engineers and tell them this was happening. The designers would then either say, great, this is a great design, or then go back and try to do a new arrangement of the cups and the turbine and so forth. And so he was the first. And who was the second?
And who is Clemens Herschel?
Clemens Herschel was head of the Holyoke Water Works, the owner of the Holyoke Canal system. He also designed a second dam put into place in Holyoke. The first one had been built 1848. He, in the 1890s, had built a new one. He designed that first one. He actually left by the time they started building it. But it was finished, that masonry dam, in 1900. What else did he do? He did those two jobs. He also was the head of the second test flume. The second test flume moved along the second level canal down maybe a mile and a half south to a place that's just beyond Cabot Street. It's still there. It's been filled in, so it's not operational. Bull has a test flume, but his test flume building is still there. It takes the water from the first level canal and drops it downwards onto the turbines that are put into the flume. You could test them here, and it was a dedicated site with a cylindrical pit where the water can come in and drop right in. So it's a little more systematically made. Hundreds of tests were done each year. A given turbine would take up to 3 days of testing to get the right situation. Designers from all over North America would bring their turbines in on trains and put them in there and say, test them, give us the results. So Holyoke was making money off of the canals and the mills, but also off this test flume, because they charged the designers for that given test of the turbine. So he was the second of them, and who was the third?
Now how about John Cormack?
John McCormick was the third of the test flume's heads. And so what he did, he got it up to really high scientific level. He stayed there for about 30 years, while the other two only stayed there for about 10 years. He used the same pit as the Herschel pit, and he was the ultimate scientist. He was the ultimate engineer. He would tell the designers, this was the results, maybe you can get better results going this way. And Holyoke became world renowned, not only for its canal, but also for its test flume, because of him. He made the best test flume site in the world with the best test. And so his work was incredibly important. I'm not saying the other two weren't important, but he brought it to the highest possible level. And to give you an example, at the beginning of his 30 years of being there, the best percentage or efficiency was about 84%. When he was done after 30 years, the best efficiency of the turbines being brought in was 96%. That's incredible. That means the water rushing in, 96% of that water was being transferred into rotational energy of a turbine, which is incredible. Number 4?
Now, what do you wish happens to this test flume structure?
I want it to be part of the federal government's national landmark program. I want the whole canal system and the test flume, which the building's still there, to be a national landmark. If the Lowell Canal system could be a national landmark, which it is, and the Niagara Falls Canal be one too, why can't the Holyoke Canal and its test flume be a national landmark? I want to write that up someday and make it happen.
Now, should a canal walk extend to this site?
Yes, there's 2 canal walks now. One opposite the Holyoke Heritage State Park. There's one down also on Race Street, which is very large and beautiful, with its own bridge. And the third one I heard is going to go from that Race Street site to Cabot Street, take a left, and go out to Willimantic Street. But I want the fourth one to go from the juncture of that second and third one on Cabot Street and Race Street. I want it to go up a block and a half all the way up to that test flume. And it deserves to have its own canal walk because that test flume is the most important building on the Holyoke Canal. Sure, there should be other walks along the way. I think that this brick walkway should extend from the first level canal into Pulaski Park, where the canal system has its gateway. I also think there should be a walkway out to the Vietnam Veterans Bridge and further south at some point too. But I want the fourth one, when it is built, go out to this test flume. Thank you.
So thanks for listening to us about that. And again, you can check out some of his other podcasts and tour schedules at his website, holyokecanaltours.org, or email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And hopefully we hear from you. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me today is Holyoke's very own historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Mr. Robert Como. And he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and on the brick walk, you have a great sense that you're walking through history, and so I'm glad they made these two along the way.
That's exciting. And now, so today you're going to be telling us about the Holyoke Canal walkways, right? So tell us about walkway number 1.
Okay, so walkway number 1 goes from one city block to the next, and it goes from the Massasoit to the Merrick thread mill on the other side. To find it, you go to Heritage State Park and you look across the canal from where if you're on the edge of the canal, you look across, and across there, it's a brick walkway. So you're walking from Dwight Street to Appleton Street, and it's made out of true brick. And there's a bit of extension after that onto the property of the Massachusetts Green High Computer Center. And if you want to walk on it, great. You can also ride your bike on it. It's a great place to start any canal walk because from there you can use my information and go through the various stops. And I'm glad along the way they decided we're going to build up this system because people appreciated it very much. They didn't damage it, and they put it right at one of the very historic and open places so people could see it. And that was, of course, was by design so people would get used to walking on it.
Now, so can you tell us about walkway number 2?
Okay, walkway number 2 was put in maybe 10 years ago. It's beautiful. And what it is it's brick face, so it's no more than half brick thick. It's not a true brick walkway like number 1 was. And to find it, you go to Race Street, and you'll find that in the very beginning of Race Street, it's a tar sidewalk. But 1 block up from there, between Dwight Street and Appleton Street, again, you'll see that there's brick put down. But this time also, you have a pedestrian bridge that is converted from being an old spike into that the trains could take into one of the mills. And this one covers the mills between, you can see the old Lyman Mill or open square, and it goes all the way past, so you can see the Merrick number 4, or number 3, I'm sorry. And so it's just as long as the other one, but it has that very, very nice walkway. On the other side of the walkway bridge, they start again with the brick. And so you have, for the first time, both sides of the canal be covered with this brick walkway. So at this point, you have these 2 systems put in place in the same area, but of course they want to build them up, and that's what they're going to do.
So now quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill in our listeners, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour, also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B. That's BOBCAT4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are perfect for family, for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family, or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. They're also good for just getting outdoors for the day. So now getting back to our interview, tell us about the future walkway number 3.
Okay, it's already been designed. I've seen the beautiful designs. They were presented about 5 years ago. And hopefully within the next 5 years, they'll actually implement these designs. And where they're going to go, they're going to extend from the southern part of walkway number 2 and cover 1 more city block to the south, that is from Appleton Street to Cabot Street. And it's going to have brick on one side of the canal side. And then once you get to Cabot Street, they're going to take a left or go towards the east. And at that point, they're going to go along Cabot Street, and one side is going to be brick walkway, the other side is going to be a sidewalk. The side towards the north will be the brick walkway, and the side to the south would be a vastly improved sidewalk. So it's going to go on both sides, but only one side with brick. And of course, it has to go crossing Main Street, and then going through the South Holyoke neighborhood. It's going to reach up to the Willamette Bridge. Now, when it gets to the Willamette Bridge, the brick side, which is the north side, will have right at what's called the Stone Arch Bridge over the 3rd level canal. Right there, they have a tiny park, and the brickway is going to end there. So it's going to be quite beautiful when it's implemented. And, I can't wait for such a design.
So after that, where should there be more extensions of the brick walking system?
Well, 2 known extensions are going to happen in the following way. There's going to be a bike lane on the entirety of Canal Street. And not going to be any brick on that. So it's going to reach from where the Willamette Bridge starts and go towards the north and take that curve on Canal Street, crossing the lane where you would get onto the Vietnam Veteran Bridge and keep going, crossing the Hadley Mills and keep going, and then reach all the way back to the second brick walkway. And so it's going to connect in another way the second and third brick walkways together. And so this bike lane is not going to be with any brick. But they're going to leave the option, though, of trying to get a brick walkway on Water Street and a good part of this. Now, there's going to be one more, hopefully, brick walkway put in, and you would call this the fourth brick walkway, and that would be from the north end of walkway number 1, and bring it through the road that Open Square is now on, bring it up towards Pulaski Park, and connect it to the first input on Pulaski Park, where you can look out and see the gatehouse. That would be a great spot for the fourth walkway. That was designed by the Conway School of Design, but it's only at this point just a dream. No plans have ever been put forth. But I hope it happens, because what a great place to have a walkway.
Okay, now thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of other podcasts and much more on his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.